This is the moment we've all been waiting for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod, hosted by Tony Pesta, Jackson Flickinger, and Corey Walsh. And Boston hasn't seen the boys back in town like this since Ben Affleck and Jeremy Renner. The Cleveland Cavaliers throw a punch and tie the series 1-1, headed back to Cleveland. We might get a rare back-to-back optimistic pod out of Jackson, and so I'm just going to let him cook. Much like Caris Levert in isolation, sometimes you just got to let him cook. Guys, how are you feeling after that game?
That's not really the most ringing endorsement of
tonight
your co-host.
Kind of.
I mean, kind of.
We got good Caris tonight, so we get Jackson in his bag.
But when you get good Caris, you also get bad Caris too. And there was definitely some bad Caris.
I have a feeling the Boston fans who were not very happy with you last game are going to be even more upset.
Was there actually a comment?
A couple Derek White stands, which I want to go on record saying I like Derek White. We'll start with a positive.
For sure.
But let's start off. What was the biggest takeaway from tonight's game? What was the main thing that you felt was the difference maker between game one and game two? Because the Cavs kind of ran Boston off the floor. I mean, their fans were leaving early. They were up by 29 at one point. This is the first road win the Cavs have gotten under this tenure, dating all the way back to that play-in tournament where they lost to Brooklyn. So how are you guys feeling right now?
Corey, you go.
I feel like I'm incredibly close to getting that forearm tattoo of the doubt.
They crossed out.
Because there's no reason to doubt these Cavaliers now. The series is over. I hope Boston enjoyed it. It was a nice run. No, but in actuality, it was just we all simultaneously, after seeing Evan Mobley putting his fingerprints all over the first quarter, all had the same thought. Wow, this is great. But will this last? The famous Evan Mobley question after great first quarter runs. And while he wasn't as aggressive scoring, I felt like I was overall very impressed with his aggressiveness overall. He was trying to push in transition, start breaks on his own. Defensively, he was really deterring Boston from getting to the rim when I felt like Cleveland's defense was trying to siphon them in that direction, getting really aggressive, jumping on the perimeter, forcing them to go inside. I felt like it was a great game to symbolize that Mitchell had probably one of his more efficient games and we've seen in a while, mostly because he didn't have to carry the Cavs offense on his back because other role players were stepping up and making his load a lot lighter. So I feel like there's a lot that is pretty promising heading towards game three. The question is, was this just simply a case of the variance of the Celtics 3-pointers going in the Cleveland's favor and it could just swing back to what we saw more towards in game one?
I mean, Derek White shooting 1 for 8 from 3. I think you can count on that a couple more times this series, right? No? Okay. What I will say is we found, I at least wrote about it for Down Euclid about how Evan Mobley finding those switches in the fourth quarter was something from a game that felt like you couldn't take anything from. And that's what he really did a good job in the first half until he got into foul trouble. I think he kind of came out in the third quarter like that too. But what I think is most he finished around the basket the way he needed to, which is great. We know that he can do that. But I think what's really encouraging is the way he was able to confidently take that little mid-range 10 to 15 footer and then also play make from there. Because what did the Knicks say? Evan Mobley, you take this 15-foot jumper or play make from this spot, and he just froze over 5 games. And that's one of the many things that the Cavs, one of the many reasons why the Cavs kind of, flamed out like they did. This time in this game, he just always made the right play, and he was never hurried, but he wasn't frozen. And I think that's where, when we talk about Evan Mobley's development, it's we see the development. And I think that's why it's easy to get frustrated because you don't see it more consistently. But this is why the Cavs went all in for Donovan Mitchell. You look at Anthony Edwards and Evan Mobley. 2 years ago, we were all like, if you would have said who's better, Anthony Edwards or Evan Mobley, we all would have said Evan Mobley easily. He's already like one of the best defensive players. He's shown a lot on offense. Now you're going to get laughed at if you even suggested that Evan Mobley's a better player, and rightfully so. But
Yeah.
games like this is why we thought that, because we saw those little things, and then when he puts it all together, plus being a dominant defensive player, you're like, this just changes the entire Cavs team, and this is a really good matchup for him to keep showing this.
I just thought what was really like impressive with him was there was like a moment right off the tip where they went in that switch that we saw late in the second half of game one, where they got him on White and he had the ability to just turn around and score. It looked like it was like a record scratch moment for him where he hesitated, then he kicked it back out to Okoro, who proceeded to dribble it out of bounds, but that's not the point.
Which was
but then you kind of thought, oh God, so he probably just shifted his mentality back off, but then proceeded, I think a few possessions later, to go back to back on Horford in the post and then scored on both of those. And then that's all it took for him to kind of get the ball rolling for him. So I thought that was a huge sign of growth from him as well, because I feel like in game one, we saw more often those record scratches than him feeling comfortable enough to take his matchup.
And I think his playmaking wasn't like, oh, I don't feel comfortable, I'm just going to pass out to the perimeter and just like Donovan Mitchell hits a shot and they count it as an assist. Like he was playing the game the right way. I think like the best example is that like little cut that Isaac, like that backdoor cut that Isaac Okoro had. I think it was in the third quarter. It's like that is the play that Evan Mobley needs to make. And if he keeps, because like the Celtics are making him make decisions, making him read the defense and forcing him to execute. And today he just passed that test after he threw it to Isaac Okoro.
Yeah, I think it's important with Mobley's development. A lot of times, because we haven't seen it consistently yet, he hasn't put it all together, we can get very disappointed and frustrated, and it's completely understandable. But it's important to remember that he has shown these flashes, and these are the things that, at least for me personally, I look for when it comes to young players, because whether or not he manages to put it all together consistently, it's impossible to know. But clearly there's something here with Mobley. In that first half, we talked about it on the last episode, it felt like there was something he could carry over from the end of game one because of Boston's lack of size down there, their lack of rim protection, and the way Cleveland was going to be able to generate looks for him. You were hoping that there would be an emphasis on Mobley to come out and really set the tone. In that first half, he finished with 15 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block. That's pretty dominant. Now, he ended up finishing with 21, a playoff career high, 10 rebounds, ended up with 5 assists, shooting 9 of 15. They kind of, I wouldn't even say they went away from him in the second half. It was mainly because he took care of business in the first half. The rest of the floor opened up for the other Cavaliers in a way where I think Corey hit on this at the beginning. Donovan kind of coasted for a while. He was 2 of 6 in the first half. He didn't really have to do anything. And then in the second half, as they start to gain momentum and blow the game open, he finishes with 29 points. He starts hitting some ridiculous 3-pointers. And Corey mentioned this in the group chat, the Fear the Sword group chat, so I'm going to steal your take here. It looked like his knee, which has been bothering him when it comes to elevating for jump shots, it looked much better in the second half tonight, and he was able to actually raise up and shoot with some confidence. And Corey mentioned that might be because he wasn't carrying that load in the first half, having to carry that burden of getting to the rim over and over again, because Mobley did it for him. Other players stepped up. Even Levert had a good first half. And so this is really the vision of why they traded for Donovan Mitchell. It's just, hey, you have Evan Mobley who can give you 21 and 10 and 5 on the road in a playoff game. You have Darius Garland, who we'll get to, who didn't light it up by any means, but had another good game. He had a solid game. And to round out my rambling, Mitchell finishes as a plus 38. Mobley finishes as a plus 35. That was dominant from these two.
What I think the Mobley thing really allowed the Cavs to do is really get inside the paint. And I feel like in game one, they really tried to like set the tone with shooting over the top of the defense, and that simply wasn't working. If you look at game two, they only had 10 threes in the first half. They were like 3 for 10. And they really, when you look at the box score, you see the Cavs shot like 45% from 3. You think, oh, this is a really, they won the same way the Heat won, by shooting them off the floor. But really, they stayed in the game because they were able to get to the basket, and then that opened up the 3-point shot. And then Donovan and Darius, they both had really good shooting nights, but they didn't have high volume outside shooting nights. It wasn't one of those games where they were both just, shooting over the. It wasn't like we always come back to the Phoenix game for Darius, where he's just shooting over the top of, the Suns defense. And it's like, well, it's not going to keep going like that forever. And it never does. Donovan's not going to keep shooting like this, but he wasn't scoring just because he was hitting outside shots. And the Cavs offense was functioning in the first half because they were getting inside and taking advantage of the things that they could.
Yeah.
It also put
Darius and Donovan. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say real quick. Darius and Donovan combined for 9 of 12 3-point shooting tonight.
Yeah, I was going to say that it felt like in the first half, Mitchell also benefited because it felt like it put the Celtics in a really tough position. I feel like the Cavs offense was really coasting, and Mobley specifically, when the Celtics defense was forced to choose between doubling Mitchell off the drive or just sticking with Mobley. And I felt like Mobley generated a lot of his cuts, off rolls that way.
Yeah, I think I tweeted this, one of the biggest, if not the biggest area of growth we've seen from Mitchell throughout the playoffs and the season is the way he is handling double teams and traps. Boston, when the game was kind of getting away from them, they tried to start throwing some traps at Mitchell, and they certainly have the length on the perimeter to really disrupt him. I thought he made great decisions out of every single one. I think he generated 2 clean looks off of it. I know he got a Strus, a wide open 3 off of it. And it's the difference maker from last year where those were turning into live ball turnovers that were going the other way. But I thought he had a really good control of the Cavs offense all the way through. And again, that the way they established themselves inside of the paint opened up the floor for them to finally generate some good. I mean, they generated good looks last night or in game 1 too, but they hit them this time. They shot 13 of 28 from downtown, 46%. They outscored Boston by 15 points on the 3-point line. And that's what a lot of the series comes down to is the battle of the 3-point variance.
Yeah, and I think this is where I think the Cavs offense needs to, we are people who want the Cavs to shoot as many threes as possible. I think we've made that clear over the last year and a half or so. But Boston's defense is kind of built to take away the threes because they switch everything. They don't, we saw that in Sam Merrill's minutes in game 1 where it was like Sam's moving off ball and it's just switch. You're not creating those shots. They don't collapse the defense in a way that the Cavs sometimes do, for example, where it creates the drive and kick opportunities. You have to just, they force you to beat them one-on-one. And I think that's what the Cavs realized that. And that's kind of they came out and they tried to beat them one-on-one, and they did. And that's what they have to keep doing. And then they also have to hold up on the defensive side of the ball because Boston can't shoot you out of a game, even if you're executing good offense.
I felt like in game 1, if you look back at especially the first quarter, a lot of Cleveland's clean 3-point looks came off of the Horford drop coverage. They would usually have to switch on to Horford, and Horford just wasn't going to commit at the line. And that's why Okoro got hot early because Horford was just sagging off of him. And a lot of Garland's quote unquote clean looks, the ones that we assume he should take and make but didn't, were also given off of those looks. And it felt like in this, Tony was pointing out, even when Mitchell was trapped, it was generating clean looks, not because they were in drop, but because they were making the appropriate passes and relied more on ball movement than just hoping for the right matchup.
I do think that Boston, I always think you should trap Donovan Mitchell if I was game planning against the Cavs. But I think Boston, it's a lot more difficult to do that just because you don't have the length that Orlando, New York have. I mean, not length isn't the right word because we think of length as a bunch of 6'5+ guys. More so, they don't have the bigs that, the versatile bigs that Orlando and New York have, where they're able to just totally engulf the guards. And I don't think that, even though Boston has really good defenders, I don't think they engulf Mitchell and Garland the way that, the Knicks did or the way the Orlando did.
Yeah, they tried to trap with Horford and Tatum on the one play that I referenced where Donovan just beats him towards the baseline, kicks it out to Levert. Levert swings it to Strus, and you get an open triple that way. Strus only shot 2 of 7 tonight, but he had 2 of the cleanest looks he's had all postseason, and he knocked them down. The Cavs, as a team, were battling on the glass. I thought that was another key aspect of this game. They win the rebounding battle 44-31. I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say that's the first time they've won the rebounding battle without Allen in the playoffs. At least it's one of the first time, like one of the only times. Darius Garland, 7 rebounds, Mitchell, 7 rebounds, Strus with 6, Mobley with 10. And what did you guys see in that department? I feel like that was one of their best rebounding nights as a unit dating back to last year.
Well, Boston missed a lot of threes, and if you miss threes, you're not going to be able to clean it up with just your big. So you need your guards to chip in, and I think they all did a good job. I think Mitchell, like, we were asking for him to rebound more in that Knicks series, and I always feel like with Mitchell, he is a really good rebounder when he's trying to do it. It's just something that he doesn't always put an emphasis on, and I think tonight he really put an emphasis on it and was a really good rebounder.
I feel like rebounding is also really tied to like how the team's overall performing. And I feel like the Celtics are a very emotionally based team. Like they're driven by how they're playing. That's why most of their losses just seem so lopsided as compared to like most teams. They can lose a game by themselves if they just aren't trying. They on paper should out rebound the Cavs even without Kristaps. I mean, Cornette generates a lot of their second chance opportunities, but he's not going to be on the floor for the same amount of minutes as Horford because he's honestly not that great of a backup center. He's just in the right spot, and he's tall enough to grab over most of the Cavaliers. So I just feel like if the Celtics are losing, like Jackson said, and they're missing their threes, they're not really getting much to kind of boost their energy, and they're just too driven on themselves, and they can just, that's like where the 3-point variance has like a cascading effect for them too. It's just, if it's not falling, their energy just seems to fall flat. And I don't think they rebound well from not performing well for quarters at a time.
And that cascading effect was why we talked about Mobley being so important after last game, because it's like Derek White hits a 3. All right, now the Cavs go down and they don't get a basket. Oh, Derek White hits another 3. Now the Garden's going crazy. And now, you went from being down 9 to being down 15. And it's like,
goes from do to doubt. It's terrible.
Right.
I want to switch gears now and talk a little bit about Darius Garland, because he did finish with just 14 points again, which does not feel like enough. And it's not. I know they won by pretty comfortably, but it's still not what you want. But 4 or 5 3-point shooting, he did punish the drop over and over again. The 7 rebounds, I think, are huge. I like that. At least compared to last year, even when he wasn't giving enough offensively, he is chipping in other departments. I thought tonight, it's kind of what I mentioned. I don't remember which pod it was, but it was during the Magic series. I think it was after the first 2 games where I said, Darius, his numbers, it still doesn't feel like enough, but it feels a lot better because the team is winning. If they somehow lost this game, you would look at this and be like, 14 points. I mean, come on, dude. Like you're 4 or 5 from downtown. You didn't get more shots up, but because they won, it feels a lot better. Like I was surprised he only had 14, honestly. I thought him and Donovan combined for like 20 each just by watching it. And then I checked and no, only 8 attempts from Garland. So what did you guys think of this game from him? Because I want to say it was a good game, but it's still so far below what you would expect from him. Obviously you win by 24 points. I'm not complaining by any means, but what do you make of this game from Garland?
Sorry, I was just going to let you cook.
I always just assume Jackson wants to pounce on it first.
I don't want to.
I'll say one more thing. I want to say one more thing though. I don't know exactly how many points he had in the second half, but I think a good chunk of that came in the second half from Garland. He was very quiet in the first half.
That's all they talked about at the halftime was how they just picked on Darius for 5 straight minutes. Where Bamba,
I thought he was on
good.
The panel for a second.
He was the guy holding up the cue card saying just slander Darius over and over. Darius is like becoming a very frustrating player in the sense that I feel like he kind of matches whatever. It's like when you want him to play at his most aggressive, he usually just tries to fade into the background because he's probably like mentally like, I'm not needed. I'll just kind of just be there, try to be connective tissue for this offense. And it translates to nothing because it's glorified hockey assists, if anything. And he's only shot I think he only shot 4 times in the first half. So overall, like it's a frustrating performance. And even in the second quarter, it just felt like Mitchell was kind of carrying the torch for the 3-pointers, even though Darius had his own. Yeah, third. Sorry. And also one of the 3-point attempts, I swear to God, I thought was a there was a foul of some kind, because Derek White literally turned his back to Darius after he limped on his possession, and Darius threw it from like 4 feet behind the line. And it just felt like from the moment that we saw him kind of tweak his ankle, I think it just seemed like Darius mentally was not in the same game as the rest of the team, which is upsetting. You kind of hope that in these games where they're getting out of hand late, that Darius could kind of generate his own offense and use that as an opportunity to kind of see what's working, what isn't against the Celtics defense.
As the resident Darius Garland skeptic, I do want to say that I'm not as down as Corey, which, you know, is weird.
What a turn.
Well,
I just love him so much.
I wrote for Fear the Sword earlier today about how Darius is getting really clean looks, and he wasn't getting clean looks against the Magic. Like the Magic were able to really, you know, you have multiple rim protectors out there. The perimeter guys were staying really connected to him, so that it was really hard for him to shoot over the top of defense, let alone. Is my point that bad, Tony?
Listen, man, I'm just tired.
like it made it hard for him
yawning.
It wasn't that you yawned. It was how egregious
yawn.
It was.
It was a 5-second one for sure.
Like
a big one.
Darius couldn't generate looks over the top easily because his guy was able to be so connected to him on the perimeter. The Celtics can't do that because they don't have the rim protection, and even in his misses from game one, they were all looks that you were like, these were good looks, and then you like today, those were also good looks. I think he just needs to be more aggressive in hunting those looks, but does he need to be more aggressive hunting the looks when the offense is humming like it was today? And that's where I want him to be more aggressive when the offense isn't humming and when like Donovan Mitchell's hobbled, nobody else is taking a shot, and like we're just begging somebody else to do something. That's when we need, you know, Darius Garland to step up. Not when, oh, Evan Mobley has it going, I'm going to keep feeding him the ball. Oh, Caris Levert is doing stuff, I'm going to make sure he's in a good spot to do his thing. Oh, now I can take the shot, I will. So I think that's where you see like the best version of Darius Garland, even though I don't think this was a good game. I think this was like he played the game the right way. So I don't have big criticisms of him. But if this game is different, if Donovan doesn't have it going, this is like, hey, Darius, you can get these clean looks. Go and hunt them.
Yeah. I think, you know, I would say it is a good game from him. Like, because if I'm giving him a teammate grade in 2K, I'm giving him like honestly probably like an A- because it was such a quiet game. Like I'm thinking like 2K teammate grade. Like he got like an A- because he didn't mess up at all, and he's very efficient.
I think that Darius would always get like an A. Like he's like he games the system to always get an A, even though he doesn't actually like deserve an A.
But he got 7 rebounds. That boosts the rating alone.
Oh yeah, 7 rebounds. He honestly only 2 turnovers. One of the points that I wanted to make when I brought up Garland, and I just kind of remember this now, I think part of like, I don't want to talk too much off season or what changes are going to be made to the roster, but I would like to see Garland be in bench units that have a chance of doing something, because like he is getting thrown under the bus all year. And like I get that there's not that many options there, but like when I see him out there and it's him, Niang, Morris, Levert, I'm just like, buddy, what do you expect him to do? Especially with the season he's been having. It's just those Niang minutes. If we can hit on those, hopefully it's the last. I want to hit on them. Okay,
we've been talking about it since literally
awful.
October.
But this was like some of the worst minutes he's played, Jackson. I don't understand.
They're all bad. He doesn't play.
I would argue they're all equally terrible.
Right.
I wouldn't say one's outlying.
Like he's playing against the Celtics. That's why it looks way worse.
I don't think there's been a single minute he has played in the postseason that was better than he didn't absolutely destroy everything we were doing in that 30 seconds he was out there. Like JB needs to quit it. Okay, I'm sorry. This is like, we had a very good night. The Cavs won by 24. I don't want to be negative. This was a great game all around. I'm feeling great, but I just have to, they went on a 19-5 run as soon as Niang was on the floor. He posted up Peyton Pritchard and just missed it point blank. He gave up a horrible rebound. I I've had enough of it. Listen, I'm not a hater, but sometimes I'm exactly that. Okay, we're done. Stop putting Niang out there. We don't need to see it anymore. I need to take Jackson's role as a hater because he's been optimistic recently. But getting back into something positive,
the Cavs have gone like 9 quarters this postseason without scoring 19 points. So you can't just give up those runs.
Yeah,
and it felt like it was like, oh, the Celtics finally got rolling. It was like, yeah, like the Cavs threw the boulder down the hill.
He's rolling around every other possession.
That's true.
It seems like stuff on Peyton Pritchard turned into a jump ball where Niang is on his back. How does that happen?
Because I was like, man, if Niang could beat like a switch, he'd be so much more like useful. Because and it was like he like did, and then they gave him the ball, and I was like, oh, that's like a super clean look. He's like 2 feet away. There's no way this doesn't go in, and it did not.
He tried to make it in.
The ESPN broadcast, Richard Jefferson was like, "This is the switch you're looking for." Like as they showed him not even touch the rim. It was like post. It wasn't even mid possession. He was like, "This is why you have the minivan." He backs up Pritchard and bricks it.
Well, Caris Levert had that air ball that he retrieved, so it wasn't the worst thing that happened today.
Yeah, I do want to talk about Levert because he had 21 points.
A sneaky 21.
A sneaky 21. Someone said that the spirit of Jordan Clarkson was with Caris Levert tonight, and I felt like that was accurate. This was a Jordan Clarkson game out of Levert. He had some good moments, and then, I mean, the play where he catches his own air ball, this is actually a question I was going to ask had the game gone a little differently. If anyone listens to the Mind the Game podcast with LeBron James and JJ Redick, LeBron was talking about how the good teams, the best teams, value each possession in the playoffs, and they have a purpose with what they're trying to do. If you can see where I'm going with this, I don't know what the hell Caris Levert's purpose was on that possession. He catches the ball with 14 seconds on the shot clock. He has Derek White guarding him. He rejects a screen, dribbles into the corner. All 14 seconds are being used as he is attempting to go isolation on Derek White, who is not a mismatch. This is not like hey, clear out. We need to go one-on-one. He rejects the screen, goes ISO, airballs the shot, gets his own rebounds, call for a travel. And so I was going to ask, do you think the Cavs are doing a good job of valuing possessions and playing with a purpose? I don't think they are consistently, but they ended up doing it enough down the stretch to blow this game wide open.
I mean, we don't know that Caris Levert doesn't listen to this podcast. He might have got his scouting report of Derek White from me. So that's always a possibility. We can't rule that out. They traded
nothing for him. He's got to be a good target. Only two firsts.
There was like one possession in the third quarter where I felt the game was getting a little out of hand in the sense that like Boston was coming back and it was kind of like a helter-skelter situation. And like Caris Levert dribbled it up the court and I was like, oh, he's going to reset, give it to Donovan. Donovan's cooking. And he just dribbles for 10 seconds and then takes a mid-range contested jumper. He made it, but I was like, what? Like, this is not... Who called for this in this moment?
It feels like Caris Levert factory resets to like his Brooklyn Nets days way too frequently when it just doesn't make sense. It's like, you know what? The mid-range is back. I'm just going to go up on Al Horford, put my shoulder into him, create zero separation and pull up. And it usually doesn't work out, shockingly. Believe it.
All right. Can we talk about why the Celtics suck now, or have we made it this far?
I have one more thing before we get into that because listen, Celtics fans, go at Jackson. Okay. Go at Jackson. We'll get to that part. The last
go to the comment section because I don't read them, so you know, have fun.
The last thing I do want to say, two things actually, very quickly. Shout out to Tristan Thompson. He played a solid 10 minutes tonight. I thought he was very helpful. And then I got to talk about Okoro super quickly because he finishes again 5 of 6 from the floor, 12 points. All of them were just felt good. I mean, he's making timely cuts. This is a point that I want to make, and I give a shout out to Jackson because he's always the one saying this. It feels good when Okoro and Mobley look like basketball players when they're able to play the game of basketball. They're actually involved in the offense. Okoro is screening a lot. Like he was out there setting a whole bunch of screens, dribble handoffs, cutting behind the defense rather than just standing in the corner. Mobley's bringing the ball up the floor. And it's just so fun when those two, because they're so good defensively that when they're able to be involved on offense and do things, you can keep them out there. And you're like, okay, this makes sense. Okoro is actually a really, really helpful player when he's being a basketball player and they're allowing him to do things. And just to reel it in a little bit, some of it comes down to Okoro having to be effective in those moments. Obviously, if he's turning the ball over like crazy or, whatever, you can't have him being a basketball player. You have to put him in the corner, but he's clearly grown a lot since his first few seasons. And this was just a great game out of those two.
And that's easily my best take that I've had, which, I've had a lot of takes. But it's just, like, the frustrating thing with Isaac Okoro is it's not like he's not a bad basketball player. Like, he has skills. And that's the thing that's always the most frustrating. He's not somebody who you have to put him in the corner because if he dribbles the ball twice, it's, going off his foot out of bounds, which, I think he might have done today, but that's neither here nor there.
It happens to the best of us.
But so that's when you like see it, you're like, he makes so much more sense as a basketball player because he's so versatile and he can, like, he's the only guy the Cavs really have that you feel good in the matchup against Tatum and Brown. And I do think that Max Strus deserves a shout out because he also, I think, really battled in those situations. And I think Caris Levert, I think
they all did, honestly.
But he's really important and you can see why.
I agree. Now, as we wrap up, I think let's try and frame it in a, Jackson, you can just do your thing, honestly. I was going to say let's frame it in a productive way. How are the Cavs, how do they pull this off tonight? Because Boston obviously looked like they were on another level entering the series and in game one. It felt like the Cavs might just be outmatched. They managed to hold Derek White tonight. They managed to contain that. Jason Tatum has 25.
Can't count on that every night.
You don't feel Jason Tatum's 25 at all, really. It felt very flat. Jaylen Brown didn't get it going to the degree that we saw it in game one. And so, like, what is the difference here? What changed?
I think the biggest thing that playoff basketball requires you to do is it requires you, another thing that LeBron said on his lovely podcast, like, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think what the Celtics, they're not comfortable being uncomfortable in the sense that they don't have a second option when the outside shots aren't falling. And they're a good enough team. And in the regular season, you can win a ton of games like that. And when it's going well, like, 3-point shots are very cumulative. And it feels especially so with Boston. When they hit one, it's easier to hit the second one. When they hit the second one, it's easier to hit the third one. And it just keeps snowballing. But the same thing happens when you miss. And when you're in a situation where it's a tight game, it just becomes just a little bit harder to make those shots. And if you don't have like an easy button, something that you can just do and know that, hey, we're getting a clean look. Hey, we have, Anthony Edwards. We know that if he's going to the basket, he's going to get, a clean look. You're going to live with that. That's not something you can say about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
Fan.
Yeah, well, I was trying to just think of somebody
yeah.
that,
no,
but
I agree.
We saw this with Donovan Mitchell in Game 7, where he didn't have his shot falling and was able to just keep going to the rim, going to the line. And I know Boston does do a good job of getting to the line, but that's mostly because they're so spaced out and it relies on that. It's not necessarily that they are a team that can like punish you inside where you feel like, oh, we have to have help at the rim. We have to do that. And that's where I think they can lose games like this and they can lose to worse teams than their skill level because they're so reliant on one thing. And they're very good at that one thing, but that one thing that they're reliant on doesn't translate to every situation.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw, that's what we saw with that's what they've lost to Miami twice. I think they were the better team against Golden State in the finals when they were up. It felt like they had Golden State on the ropes. It felt like this team is way too old. But then they weren't able to get over the hump because they didn't shoot well.
They ran into Andrew Wiggins.
That also
Cavalier
happened.
Legend.
But
I
think they're going to, there's a reason why this team loses. And I think they're going to lose again to a team that's worse than them. And if you're the Cavs,
why not us?
Why not us? Right. And that's kind of what, I don't think the Cavs are built to necessarily do that. I think if they had Jarrett Allen,
it would help.
They would be built to do it because they could get to the basket, especially without Porzingis. And I think this is where why the Porzingis thing was so
credit
important.
To Porzingis, yeah,
right?
Because he gives them that option, a post up, someone who can attack the basket.
So you want to switch, Porzingis can beat the switches. He makes you play 5 out in a way that Al Horford doesn't. Al Horford was 3 for 7 from 3 today. Mm-hmm. You're like, we'll let Al Horford have 7 threes. He's not going to make 3 all the time. He's not going to make 3 very often.
You'll dare Horford to try and beat you. Porzingis can just do it in his sleep.
You don't want to dare Porzingis to do that. And you can't say like, oh, we're going to put a, because you can do this, like if George Niang was really hot, you could put a point guard on him and say, you know what, just stand next to this guy and make sure he doesn't get shots off. You couldn't do that. You couldn't say, okay, well, like, Donovan Mitchell, you guard Porzingis and let Mobley roam around still because Porzingis can just beat that super easily. So that's where, Brad Stevens tried to do the right things, and I think he did the right things in getting Porzingis, but I think without Porzingis, this is a really flawed team in the sense that they need, like, 3-point variance should help you win games and help you lose games. It shouldn't be, if we're making shots, it shouldn't be the whole thing. And like, that's why, like, in 2015, people were like, the Warriors can't win because they're an outside jump shooting team. And we hadn't seen an outside jump shooting team that just relies on that win. But when you have Steph Curry, who is a very well-rounded basketball player and the best shooter of all time, you can do that. We haven't seen non-Warriors jump shooting teams do that. Like, that's not who the Nuggets were.
And the Warriors used to kill it in the mid-range, too. I think people kind of overlook that, too. They wouldn't just settle for three-pointers. They would do other options. They were a great team. As far as Boston goes, it must be, like, listen, I will say I still think Boston's going to win this series, most likely. If the Cavs win Game 3, I'll start feeling differently about that. We'll get a little more reckless. But I still think Boston should win. I think they're clearly the better team. If I was a Celtics fan, I would be frustrated that it is so make or break on the three-point shot because Jason Tatum can get to the basket. Jaylen Brown can get to the basket. It's just, I don't know if it's a mentality thing. Maybe part of it is limitations, but like, especially against the Cavs, though. Against the Cavs, they can get to the basket. The only problem is, and this is maybe an X factor that it's just a given that we haven't talked about it. Evan Mobley is one hell of a rim protector. So even if those guys do change their mentality and try to get to the basket, there's a chance Mobley just says, no, it's not happening. It's like Caesar in Planet of the Apes.
Sure. I think it's one of the things where you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, they don't do that. Like, we even saw in that last possession against the Cavs in March where Jason Tatum had Darius Garland on him and he said, I'm going to rise up for this contested 17-foot jumper. And it's like, cool. If you're the defense, you would sign up for a contested 17-foot jumper for the game. You wouldn't sign up for, Jason Tatum driving to the basket on Darius Garland. And I think this is kind of the things we complain about Darius Garland about, where it's like we want him to evolve and change as he is as a player. And sometimes guys are just who they are. Sometimes that's flip switches, but it's usually not going to happen in like Game 3 of a series or in like a finals run. So that's where it's like, I think the Celtics are more beatable than any of the numbers say, and I think a team like the Knicks, who I think are a better team than the Cavs right now, I think they could actually, I think they would win that series. I would pick them to win that series. I wouldn't be shocked if the Celtics won, but I would not be surprised at all if the Knicks were able to just bully them and stuff. And it's not because they're the better team. It's just because I trust them to to have multiple ways to beat somebody.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It feels nice seeing the Knicks beat up on other teams, I'll be honest. It makes some of my takes from last year look a little better because it wasn't just Jarrett Allen, guys. It's happening to everybody.
We'll see in 2 weeks how those
we'll be discussing the rematch in the conference finals. Now,
Tony Pasta part 2.
let's finish out here very quickly because my MacBook is dying. Where are we at with the series now? It's 1-1 headed back to Cleveland. Any adjustments to our predictions? I don't remember what everyone said. I think I said Celtics in 6.
I said Celtics in 5, and I switched it to 6 after last game. So I'm sticking with that.
I was also at 6. So I didn't remember us all three being there, but it's cool.
It's the thing about 3-point shooting is that like they could get hot at in Cleveland really easily, and
Mhm.
it could just be like a blowout this way. So I don't know how much home court advantage is going to do for the Cavs, but I mean, you would, and we obviously know because the Heat just did it. The Heat just
Yeah.
got up 1-0. But
Mhm.
I think the difference is if you were to draft
More
players
sustainable.
if you were to draft players from Miami and Cleveland, I think you would draft like 5 players from Cleveland before you're drafting the available guys from the Heat. I mean,
Tyler.
besides Bam, you would take Bam very high. But you know what I mean? Like, it's different
Mhm.
when you're relying on Tyler Herro as opposed to Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. So
Yeah.
I think they can push them in a way that the Heat never had a chance to, because the Heat won because they were unconscious from 3, whereas the Cavs, I think they changed this game by being a bully in the first half.
Yeah, I agree. I think if the Cavs win game 3, I will be way more optimistic than I am right now. I'll still probably say Celtics in 6, but hey, they had one job. That was to split this road trip, and they did it. It's 1-1, headed back to Cleveland. They have a chance to put some serious pressure on the Celtics, make them uncomfortable if they win game 3.
Are the
That's
boys
going to do it for
back?
this episode of the Junkyard Pod. The boys are back in town. They've
Okay.
never been more back in town. After game 3, we'll see if they leave town, but as of right now, they're in town.
Might put a short stop.
That's all for this episode of the Junkyard Pod. I want to thank everyone for watching or listening. I'm trying to be quick because my laptop is on its dying breath. So thank you guys. Subscribe. Jackson, go Cavs. Do you have anything to say to
I
Brian?
agree, go Cavs. Brian, can you get Tony a charger for his MacBook?